Eternals is directed by Chloe Zhao and stars Gemma Chan, Richard Madden, Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek, and among others. And this is the 26th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that deals with a group of beings that are known as the Eternals that come from a distant world that span over thousands of years, and they have to protect the Earth from these creatures that are known as the Deviants. I'll leave it at there as I'm not going to go into too much detail. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, I've gone in and leave about this Marvel Cinematic Universe and about a lot of the different films that have come out over the years. And since this year has become pretty much the return to form when it came to having movies come out for the Marvel Cinematic Universe again, with Black Widow and Shang-Chi, and also the other ones on Disney Plus with the Marvel Cinematic Universe television shows, including WandaVision, all them. It's been kind of had a rocky start getting in for at least since Black Widow came out. It seems like ever since Avengers Endgame came out, or at least even after Spider-Man Far From Home, in my opinion, that it feels like the MCU has kind of had a hard time trying to get back into the spotlight again with everything that's been coming out. And I'll be honest that this is actually one of those films that I really wasn't looking the most forward to, because ever since I started seeing the trailers for it, I didn't really know much about the characters of the Eternals, and even with that being said, the trailers just didn't really hype me up as much, and so it just didn't really click to me like, some of the other ones that are coming out. And so this, out of the movies that were anticipated this year, this is probably my least anticipated, at least from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it just looked very bland and kind of like, like they're trying to be like the Avengers without having to set up all these different characters in different movies to set it up with, because you're having to focus pretty much on 10 main characters for the entire film. And after upon seeing the film, I can honestly say that out of all the MCU films I've seen, I think this one's probably my least favorite. I honestly really didn't care about this movie that much. I didn't hate it. I thought it was pretty boring at times. I thought it just really was forgettable. I felt like it just really missed the mark a whole lot of things that while I give them it's well intentioned and ambitious, but it really missed the mark on a lot of what they were trying to go for. But to get my pros out of the way, I will say that the performances I thought were good. The actors, they did their part in trying to make this story captivating for their performances and everything, and they really wanted to really set something in motion with a lot of the stuff that they set up with, as far as like, there's, not going to go into detail, let's say that there's devastation that happens, there's themes about war, and there's other things that happen in the film that's good ideas that I feel like are not executed properly. But I thought the performances were all pretty strong, were strong for the most part in this. I think the ones that really that I actually thought were actually stood out for me the best were, what's his name? The guy from Stuber, forgot his name. Hold on, let me find it real quick. Kamal Nanjiani. I am so sorry if I cannot pronounce his name, but the one who plays Kingo. I thought he was good. I thought he was I thought he was pretty good, and he did brought out more of the comedy that I was kind of really seeing a lot more throughout the film, and he did actually have a whole lot more energy going compared to a lot of the rest of the cast. And I thought that him and his valet guy was funny at times, and some of the other performances I thought were still, brought some of the more captivating ones, like Richard Madden. I thought, he was good, and you also had Gemma Chan, I thought was pretty good as well. But I like their performances, but I just think that the writing really holds it back from like really getting involved with their character, so to speak. But to get my other pros out of the way, I'll say that the movie does have some good like scenes, set pieces that are interesting, and then the way they look and everything at times. There's some visual eye candy in there that I really enjoyed in some of the later parts of the film that really look compelling. And when we get to see like some of the stuff that involves with like where they act, like the visual look of where they actually come from, everything like on the ship, or or where the leader that they pretty much are sent by, I thought looked pretty cool, and it kind of reminded me of like a it looked like red looking Iron Giant kind of looking thing. It looked pretty cool in for the most part. And then some of the action sequences they're completely made. They don't really stand out too much, but I mean they're shot fine. I can at least give it that. The movie does have some good interesting song choices that I thought were surprised in the film that I enjoyed, especially. They actually have a Pink Floyd song in this movie that I thought was pretty nice to hear for the first time in a movie theater that I've ever heard. And on top of that, I will also say too is that there is some cool themes that they set up with. And there's certain ideas that they do actually set up too that I appreciate that the movie was kind of going for with trying to take risks with the story and seeing how it evolves with the characters. The characters' personalities, the way they are set up in the first half, I think was trying to really go somewhere as it went along. And there's things that involve with, say, like with war, and they're going back to devastation again. There's things that hit it hard that they try to take risks but that's where I get into more of my cons. And I'll say that as much as the performances where I thought were strong, and there was some visual goods standouts, and there's things in the story that they really could have they actually had potential for. Unfortunately, I found it very lacking and very, very boring to the point that I didn't really feel myself invested at all with any of these characters. I found every one of them to be, well, other than Kingo, the character that's trying to live the present life in as a Bollywood actor and things like that. I felt like there's just there's just all the rest of the characters. I just felt like there wasn't really to them because they didn't really spend a whole lot of time with them, and they don't really really have much of an arc going with them that much. And when they do have an arc, it feels like it's very rushed over to where we're not really getting a whole lot of emphasis on what's going on. Like, for example, we get into Brian Tyree Henry's character as Fastos, and there is a good thing that they set up with that, again, I won't go into detail, but it feels like we were missing a whole chunk of it that was like a good gap between the scenes that involved with him in the past and him in the present. And it feels like there's a huge gap that they could have filled in there to really establish more of his character and his motivation of what happens with his character. And the other thing too is that a lot of the other ones that come into, they feel like they're not really given much to do, or not really much. They don't really have much emphasis on what their character is really like, going through in their thoughts and things like that. Especially our main focus with Gemma Chan's character, and you also have Richard Madden's character. They're supposed to have a bond. They're supposed to have a love of each other. That's supposed to be from thousands of years and everything. But well, first of all, I didn't really buy much. I didn't really care too much of their chemistry together, and I felt like there's really nothing that really, they don't really spend a whole lot of time to really get to know them too well. That I really felt really like it really mattered. And that's one of the other biggest things I have with the movie too, is that it feels very, very dragged out a lot in this movie, surprisingly. And this is supposed to be an epic Marvel Cinematic Universe film, that's supposed to tell a very, long epic story like this. And it feels to me like the way it's structured and everything, it could have worked probably better as a TV series, or at least maybe a mini series where you could have really spent probably individual episodes of each character and really getting to know them more. Because you're taking basically 10 characters and trying to push them all in a 2.5 hour film. And while the length can depend on what you do with all the characters, it really feels like, they don't really do much of this in all these other parts because it feels like it just keeps padding it out throughout the entire running time. And not just that, but I felt like there are on paper risks that they do take with it, I didn't really feel much of it with the way that they played it out, because when it gets to our climax, I felt like there just really wasn't much of a, kind of really big risk that I was invested with in the film. And not just that, but I felt like the villain that they actually set up in the film, it felt like it was very very anticlimactic the way it goes down in the very end. And it was very, it was not something I I was expecting a whole lot more of what they were going to do with building this up into the climax. And because our villain, the villain they set up in the film comes way late in the movie to where we're not really spending a whole lot of time with. And I mean, that's always been one of the bigger issues with some of the earlier MCU films. But this one, it almost seemed like the villain they set up with was an afterthought. And then they were focusing on other things that, while could be interesting as a twist, I just didn't really... They do set up other plot lines and subplots that goes in here that they also set up other twists and turns that happen. But it really felt like I just didn't really get... Because I didn't really care of what was going on with any of these characters, I didn't really feel nothing of how it played out with it. Not to mention, it feels like there's some stuff that's very illogical that doesn't make any sense when it gets to our climax. Like some of characters' motivations of why they're not fighting everything, and a lot of the things that they really try to explain in the film. It really makes me feel like you're trying to cover 4,000 years of that these actual beings have been around, and I know they explain the movie of why they don't interfere, but it really felt to me like it was lazy writing, and it really felt like that just leaves a whole lot of like a whole lot of loose ends that you really would have to, that they feel unanswered if you bring it into the other films in the franchise. I didn't really buy them not intervening with some of the things that happen in some of the other films, and not just that, but one of the other biggest things I got to complain about is the editing in this film is a mess. Like, there are scenes where I feel like they're spending time in the present time, because at first it starts out with them being in the past and in 5,000 years ago and everything before that. And then it cuts to present day, and it feels like there's really no transition to where it goes. And then later they fix that by showing that it's actually in present day and then going back and forth. But they do that a lot where sometimes it's hard to tell if we're in present time or in the actual past time in certain spots. Because there's actually a spot later where I thought they were actually going to maybe show us maybe a later scene of something that we just saw from a previous scene. But no, it's actually a flashback, and there's really no way... The way the editing goes on, it feels like there's no transition that leads into that. And I know I know that there might have been... some MCU films that did that before, where, they'll show flashback scenes and stuff. But it seems to me like this one, it felt like the way it was structured, it just didn't flow right. And the editing was very off in a lot of the scenes. And not just that, one of the other things that really what I thought was bad, surprisingly, I mean, I've seen it bad before in other MCU films, but not to the extreme of this, is actually the CGI. Like, a lot of the creatures that they look like in this, they look like shit. I'm sorry, they actually really do look like shit in a lot of this movie. I thought the deviants, or whatever they're called, I felt like they were just very... Like, they look like some out of a sci-fi channel. Like, even at the beginning, I was just like, is this supposed to be in a bit... How are you going to have that in a big-budgeted Hollywood movie like this? I've always, seen good CGI in a lot of the more MCU films, but here it felt like what? Why was there suddenly a drop in quality in the effects department in this? It looked really bad in a lot of scenes. Now, granted, there are some other scenes where the deviants don't look quite as bad. Like some of the nighttime scenes, like there's a part that takes place at nighttime, or maybe it's day for night. It's like late night, kind of early morning kind of look, and they looked better here in the when they're more darkly lit. But in the daytime, when they're full as day, it feels like they really are something out of a fucking PS2, like something out of a PS2 video game. It just really looked bad. And this is one of those kind of movies where, because I wasn't really feeling much going on with the story, I feel like there should have been a lot more things that I really could have maybe liked a lot better had they would have improved upon. I can honestly say that after really upon seeing this film, there are some other things that, I'm not going to go into detail, but there's something they do set up for future sequels that, for the future universe that does have me intrigued. But that's something I want to see them do better with in a later film. Because this right here, this again feels like one of those kind of movies that, it's all set up and it leads to probably a better film after that. But overall, though, I did feel like this was a very boring, kind of superhero film that I haven't been probably this bored in a superhero film probably since Superman Returns. And I feel like it's on the same level of that movie in some ways. And so with that being said, I can say that this, to me, was probably one of my least favorite MCU films. And with that, I'm going to give the film, because I have it on I give them credit for being very ambitious and, them trying to really try to do something well for effort. I'm gonna go, because I can't go in between, but I would say that at the very minimum, I'm gonna go a very high disaster grade on the Film Freaks meter. It has good intentions, but very bad execution. So, for those of you who've also seen Eternals, let me know in the comments below of what you thought about it, and also the other films in the MCU. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.